Before starting this video presentation, I just wanted to give everyone a content warning. I'm going to be talking about how video games are cathartic for people who have been through trauma, and as a result, as you can imagine, I'm going to be talking about some pretty serious topics. While my paper covers a wider variety and features its own content warning at the beginning of it, this specific presentation will focus on cancer, losing a family member to that illness, and reactions to it as a result. So if any of you might be triggered by that or upset by that in any way, please feel free to skip out on this. I promise I will not be offended, especially I'm going to be talking about my own experience in that area, so I have been where you are and I totally understand. But for those of you who are sticking around, thank you for taking the time to listen to / watch this presentation, and I hope you find this subject matter as interesting as I did. This is my grandfather, Richard Wilcox. He was a kind, funny, intelligent, philosophical, wonderful man, and I'm fortunate enough to have had him for 22 years of my life. And while he was a great person, that didn't keep him away from the vice grip that is cancer. Back in 2020, he was diagnosed with leukemia, and November of 2022, after a 2-year, incredibly impressive fight against it, he passed away. Now, you may be wondering what my grandfather's story has anything to do with the subject matter of my presentation, how his story, his experience, in any way relates to how video games are cathartic, or rather can be cathartic. And that's what I'm here to tell you about today. See, I've always had a draw toward video games. As a child, I played more fun and familiar favorites, but the older I got, the more I found myself drawn toward games that in one way or another provided me with a therapeutic or almost cathartic experience. And now don't get me wrong, I still love my Legend of Zeldas and my Resident Evils, but I found something so much more powerful and rewarding in playing a game that provides me with some sort of catharsis, something to latch onto from trauma that I've faced in the past. I noticed this about a year ago, and then I started to wonder if any other players echoed my sentiments. And I didn't have much hope going into it, but once I really got into the groove of my research, I found that not only did other players have similar experiences to mine, but there was actually some research done in the scientific community about how video games can be cathartic and therapeutic for people who've experienced trauma. Through reading about the experiences of different players and developers about how games help them achieve a catharsis, I learned just how vastly different their experiences could be. But there was one connecting thread, and that's that the games all push them and encourage them to seek some sort of help, to heal from their trauma in some way. Which is exactly what I experienced with That Dragon Cancer and my grandfather. That Dragon Cancer is a testament to how a game can not only be cathartic for players, but for its development team in the process. See, it was created by a team called Numinous Games, and at the head of Numinous Games was a man by the name of Ryan Green. Now, Ryan Green wanted to create an experience that could help players understand what it's like to watch a family member deal with cancer. For him, that family member was his 5-year-old son, Joel. The game started out as a testament to a child who had survived long beyond the predictions the doctors had given him. But halfway through development, Joel passed away from cancer. But through this game, even when Joel was alive, Ryan and his family were able to experience a catharsis and let out and talk about what they were feeling and what they were experiencing as they watched Joel live with cancer. Because of their interesting story, the Green family and Numinous Games actually had a documentary made about them called Thank You for Playing. It's really heartwarming, gut-wrenching, and I actually really recommend watching it if you can get your hands on it. This documentary revealed a lot about the development process of the game, but it also focused on how the game was cathartic for Ryan and his family members. Nothing hits harder than Ryan and Amy's reactions to the end of the game. See, the game was initially supposed to have a different ending. They've never talked about what it was, but obviously it would have involved Joel being alive because, well, at the time he was, and they thought he'd make it a lot longer. But then when he died, they decided they had to change the ending. If they were going to represent Joel's experience as close to reality as possible, they felt like they needed to include his death and what it was like to experience that. Joel passes away, and the next scene we get is him in what they presume is the afterlife, seated on a picnic blanket outside with dogs and pancakes and bubbles, all of his favorite things. Playing through it was visceral enough, and even just thinking about it, I'm tearing up a little. But watching Ryan and Amy play through it was an entirely different experience, because that was their son. And they sobbed. They were crying, but there was laughter in the end of it. There was a realization that this is what they wanted, that it was going to be beautiful, as Amy said. It was cathartic for them. They talked about what it was like to lose Joel in that sequence. They were able to express what they'd been holding in, what they hadn't really fully talked about up until that point. Developing that game was cathartic for the entire family. And it's not just the Green family who experienced a cathartic reaction to that dragon cancer. At the Penny Arcade Expo, or PAX, before the game released, players were able to interact with a small demo. It was just a tiny snippet of the game, but it was enough to give people a cathartic reaction. Most were emotional, thought it was sad, gave Green their condolences and congratulations on creating something so powerful. But a few shared what it was like to deal with cancer, how they felt seen by the game. A lot of players had that experience, and I didn't initially think I was going to be one of them until I was. And that brings me back to my grandfather, who I talked about at the start of this presentation. I already told you that he was diagnosed with leukemia, and after 2 years, he lost the fight. Everything that unfolded in that time was heart-pounding. At first, things were fine. You know, it was scary, but he was responding well to treatment, especially because he was a healthy 80-year-old man. And other than some exhaustion and a cough, he seemed relatively fine. He was still able to attend Sunday dinners and birthdays and Thanksgivings, most of which were outside because this was taking place simultaneously with the start of the COVID pandemic. But that didn't matter. What mattered is that we got to be with him and spend time with him in any way that we could. And things were fine, yeah, until they weren't. I went to study abroad last semester, and so maybe being in another country, being far away from him, made all of this feel that much worse. But everything hit me pretty hard. He'd stopped treatment because it wasn't really working anymore, and he decided to just let what happened happen. And then he took a fall, and he never really got better after that. He was okay, but he was declining. And then in November, I got the call from my parents that I should probably come home. And so I did. I flew home, and I was there for a week. And in that week, he passed away. And I wasn't the sort, I'm still not the sort, that likes to cry in front of extended family members, and to be honest, feeling myself getting choked up right now is a little embarrassing. So, I didn't really let anything out at the time. It wasn't until I played That Dragon Cancer that I really released everything I didn't even realize at that point I was holding in. See, I didn't play the game until January. It'd been quite a few months since he passed away, and at the time, right as I was playing, my family was planning out the last details of his service. I knew, given my experience, that playing That Dragon Cancer was going to be tough. But it was also cathartic. I felt like someone was putting what I had experienced as a family member, watching someone you love be overwhelmed by cancer. I felt like I was seen. I was literally watching everything I had been through, everything my grandfather had been through, and the rest of my family had been through, play out on a screen in front of me. And yeah, at first, I cried a lot, and a lot, and a lot, and there's a voice recording out there on my phone that you will never hear of me laying out my initial thoughts. I felt so heavy after it all ended. But when I thought about the end of the game, there was a little bit of a lightness as well. Joel sitting surrounded by his favorite things made me think about how my pop-up had so many things that he loved, and I really hoped that if there is anything after life, he was surrounded by them as well. It made me think of the Sunday dinners, the Christmas Eves, the Thanksgivings, every food-related occasion that I could, being with my grandfather. And it made me think of non-food related good memories too. Like how my grandfather would take us out in a canoe on the lake that was behind their house and teach my brother and I how to paddle, or send us off on our own for the first time, or be there to make sure we didn't capsize, because that was a legitimate threat for a bit. I'd released this negativity, this horrible, gut-wrenching feeling of him being gone, and started to really focus on all of the good things that he gave us. And so that weekend, literally 2 days after I played that game, I went home for his service. And yeah, being in that space, I was still sad he was gone. I thought about the things in the future that he won't get to see, how he'll never get to see this come to fruition, even though he was so excited about it, how he won't be at my last choir concert, how he won't be at my graduation. And as you can tell by my voice, no matter how many times I've recorded this, I can't not get emotional thinking about that. But I also was reminded of the good things that I just talked about, and even more experiences that we had with him. I was able to focus on the good parts of his life, because although it still gets me every now and then, I'd released a lot of that sadness. And in that, I found my catharsis through that dragon cancer. There's so much more I could say on this topic. The ways that video games can help players and patients in therapy are pretty endless. And yeah, every player's experience is going to be slightly different, but the one thing they all have in common is that in one way or another, it pushes them to heal. And the way that I know this is because not only do I experience it myself, but I did quite a bit of research on it. Read a lot of different players' experiences and stories about how games helped them achieve a catharsis and made them want to seek help or heal from whatever it was that was holding them down. And if you want to know more about it, I highly encourage you to check out my paper once it's out there. I mean, I'm probably biased, but I think it's pretty interesting, and I'm really hoping that you might find it interesting as well. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I really hope you gained something from this. I really do.